The Turtle Beach Flight Deck just released. It's a complete kit consisting of a throttle unit and a twisty stick. There's tons of controls and even an integrated trackpad. Let's see how it does. Alright, let's open the box. Inside, wrapped into black plastic bags, we find the throttle, the grip, the base, and some cables. A brief quick start manual also is included. Here's the throttle unit. It's kinda weighty and sits firmly on the table. The handle is made of a softer plastic than the base. On the front of the grip are a bunch of controls, including some two-way switches. The anti-slip pads on the bottom are soft and work very well. Let's continue to the grip's base. It also is quite heavy. Among the controls is a flap lever and some momentary switches. Next up is the grip. The setup is quite easy. Just place it on the gimbal's connector and secure it in place. Playing around with the stick a little bit confirms my expectations. I'll go into more detail during the test, but for now, let's head over and get the system hooked up to the PC. Each device requires its own cable connection. Once plugged in, the throttle lights up and the touchscreen comes to life. The same goes for the stick. There's lots of RGB lighting and an OLED display on the top of the grip. Before we discuss the overall build quality, here's what you get in terms of controls. On the grip of the throttle unit, you find a rotary dial with an integrated mini stick, a hat, a 3-position switch, and 3 buttons. On the front are another hat, a button, a scroll encoder, and 2 momentary switches. On the base is another throttle lever, the touchscreen with additional controls, 4 rotary encoders, and a big red fire button. On the grip is an 8-way hat, an analog mini stick, another hat, and a fire button, which also acts as a trackpad. Then there's a clickable scroll encoder, a thumb-operated hat, and another button. On the front of the grip are a 2-stage trigger, an analog brake lever, and a button. On the stick's base you find a gear lever, a 3-position rotary dial, 9 buttons, 2 momentary switches, and 1 3-position switch. While this all sounds good on paper and performs okay-ish from an ergonomic perspective, I regret to say that I have to start a roast here. Let's begin with the grip. The stick's ergonomics are quite nice, especially if you have smaller hands. It's not perfect though. While I can easily reach the hats and buttons on top, the scroll encoder is placed rather awkwardly. The trackpad function of the fire button is abysmal and completely unusable. Also, the toggle switch besides it feels really cheap. Quality-wise, the hats are a bit wobbly and just about okay, except this one here. It has better switches than the others and feels quite snappy. The range of motion and precision of the mini stick is adequate. The dual stage trigger feels nice and smooth, but there's no audible or haptic distinction between the 2 stages, and the travel range between them is quite short. A surprise was the brake lever. It provides just the right amount of resistance and concludes in a precise button click. I've seen worse on more expensive products. The gear lever is spring-loaded and there's nothing to complain about it. This 3-position dial also snaps into position nicely. But then there are these buttons here in front of the stick. They use mushy membrane switches. On top of that, the large one only activates if you push it exactly in the middle, which means the wide profile doesn't offer any advantages at all. On the contrary, one has to press multiple times for it to trigger sometimes. Even sketchier are the switches on the right. They feel appropriate for the price. Unfortunately, their caps are wobbly and give the impression that they might come off sooner than later. The most horrible thing, however, is the gimbal. I'll dedicate a separate section to it in the video after we've looked closer at the throttle unit. First of all, these rotary encoders are very coarse in their rotation and quite loud. Better and much smoother is the combined rotary here. The main throttle axis moves smooth enough, there are no detents though. It only vibrates a little once you leave idle. Also, this 3-way switch here on the grip feels very sketchy and wobbly, as if it's about to fall off the moment you dare to operate it just one more time. Another problem is the mini stick, which only provides a very limited range of motion and jitters like crazy on the X-axis. Both hats are very mushy and are likely of lower internal quality than the ones used on the grip. The ergonomics of the handle are quite good, but only when operating specific elements. You can comfortably reach either the controls on the side or those at the front, but not both simultaneously. This is because you need to reposition your hand to access the front controls effectively. Large hands might lessen the issue. By the way, these two-way switches here are nice to operate and trigger very precisely. Additional controls are on the touchscreen, like these flip switches here. The smaller issue is that you have to look to operate the switches. The bigger one is that the screen is incredibly laggy. As you can see, there are some setup options here, like the possibility to set vibration detents and RGB control. You can choose between presets and custom colors. I tried to update the firmware to see if the lag gets improved somehow, but the software shat its pants repeatedly as I tried to update the throttle or the stick and just froze. Flying a bit revealed what I already had expected. Turtle Beach used the same gimbal they already run on the Velocity 1 flight stick, and it's bad. There's still far too much tension around the center, where a flight stick needs to be the most precise. It's just an inherent flaw of the cup and ball construction that's most likely used here. I mean, it's okay. The gimbal is as good or as bad as the T16000s, except the mentioned overtension at the center. You can fly precisely enough with it to even do air-to-air refueling. But the deal breaker here is, we're talking about a €400 device here. The T16000M is 125, no less precise, and the build quality is more or less the same. Even more absurd, for 385 you get the Winwing Orion 2 Metal Warthog HOTAS, which demolishes the flight deck in terms of build quality and precision. One forgoes RGB and the two displays, but in return receives a gimbal that is leagues above the Turtle Beach. As for the rest of the switches, mini sticks and heads, let's not even talk about them. There are worlds of difference. One could talk about many more things, but I believe that, no matter what features the system may conjure up, it doesn't change the fact that the basic functionality is nowhere near the price. Turtle Beach is clearly targeting the uninformed buyer here, who might be dazzled by the lights and displays, hopefully overlooking the subpar build quality and the poor gimbal. I'm sorry to say, but that's a solid pass, isn't it, Heinz?
That's worse than the ME210.
Well, that's another way to word it. And you, check out my overview here to get an impression of what's available on the market and really worth your money. I'd say either go cheap or all in and buy a proper HOTAS system. Thanks for watching and see you there.